Going for two, kickers are extra, I give them the boot. Ooh, going for two, sit back, relax while I grab me a brew. Ooh, now I'm reclining while putting my time and I'm ready to go. My spine is aligning and much my lineups, my bank account grow. I am so rich, but knowledge is all that I'm leaving it with. Ooh, listen to this, multiple options, how far can I get? Ooh, DFS Dynasty redraft tonight, I'm not finishing last. I'm finishing past any and all, I am looking to last. What else? This spot is popping and I am so locked in and only opening the door when it is opportunity knocking. And all of these spots keep on talking and talking. So what are we talking? What kind of alignment? And running it deep, even players forgotten or came from the bottom or hitting that top end. And this spot is popping, yeah, this spot is popping. And woo! This is the armchair, yeah. Put up your arms, yeah. Sound the alarm, yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo!
What is going on, guys, and welcome to episode 350 of the Armchair Fantasy Show. I am your host, of course, Geoff Lambert, and you can follow me on Twitter at JeoffLambert77. Of course, we are here every Friday night at 10:30 p.m. on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch, and you can now find us at goingfor2.live. All the links to the show is there. All the videos are uploaded to the website. So, again, that's goingfor2.live. Of course, we're on all major podcast networks. If you're currently watching us on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. See a couple guys in the chat already. What's up, Alex? What's up, Joe? Glad to see y'all tonight. All right, I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Tim. What's up, Tim?
I'm doing good, Jeff, man. Happy to be back. Looking forward to a good show here with Dennis. Welcome to the show, Dennis.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'll give an intro to Dennis. I've been talking to Dennis about DFS since probably about 2015. We've had a group chat going on about that long, and he actually appeared on the show way back in 2016. I looked it up. It was February 2016. We did an NBA DFS show. That's back when we were full audio. We had no video back then. That was back in the days when I was calling my guests and having to hold the phone up to the mic to have my guest on the show. Very long time ago. So glad to have you on the show, Dennis. Give us a quick rundown. How long you've been playing daily fantasy and anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, well, I started dabbling in it in 2013 during the NFL season, then got serious about doing all the research and knowing exactly what I'm doing the following year. I thought, as I'm sure a lot of people, I'd been playing season long since the 90s. I'm pretty good at the season long. I should be able to slide right in here and make money, and no, not so much.
Yeah, learned real quick. It's totally different.
Yeah, I really, like I said, I learned how to differentiate the next season, and that's when I started getting serious. So about 10 years now.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, guys. As always, today's show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check out their entry-leading best ball leagues, huge tournaments, private leagues. They got pick'ems for every major sport. Use our promo code GF2, get a deposit match up to $100. All you do is just simply go there, download the app or go to the website, use our promo code GF2, deposit your money and get a match up to $100. Then you can start drafting. They have weekly best ball leagues. They've got, like I said, they have the pick'ems that we do on Wednesday nights that you see. It's really super easy to use, a lot easier to use if you want to play like parlays than it is DraftKings or FanDuel. Their parlays are pretty short and simple, easy to figure out. So again, go to underdog.com and use promo code GF2.
The Weekly Rewind. Rewind.
All right, here we go. As we always do, kick the show off here with the Rewind. One good, one bad. We'll go to you first, Tim.
Yeah, my one good was that I went Chuba Hubbard last week. A lot of people were pushing Foreman on the show. I said go Chuba over Foreman, and that obviously worked out. I basically had him in every lineup, so for the most part, that did well. But my one bad was my lock of the week, DJ Moore. Obviously, some of that was due to Justin Fields getting hurt, but overall, I think it was just an underwhelming performance by him. So,
yeah, that definitely hurt me because I had him in a few of my lineups as well. Because I mentioned on the show that your locks of the week are usually pretty good, especially when you don't go with the super high owned guys. You went with DJ Moore, who wasn't going to be high owned, and didn't really.
Yeah, he kept me from having a really good day because I cashed a lot of lineups even with a 10 from DJ Moore. So
good stuff.
That was pretty rough.
Dennis, what about you? What's your one good, one bad from last week?
My one good was Kyron Williams. Pretty much saved my day. Last week, I was actually losing money at halftime of that game, and I came out with a small profit, used them in cash, used them about 40% in GPP. And my one bad was the great Zach Ertz with his 4.2 fantasy points that used him in cash too.
Yeah, Zach Ertz
was obviously a mistake.
So I had a hard time finding my one good because I was telling Dennis pre-show that I had probably my worst week in daily fantasy in a very long time. I was handed my ass. I didn't cash any GPPs. I didn't cash any of my cash games. I was sitting pretty after the 1 o'clock games, but I had a bunch of guys that busted for me in the 4 o'clock games. So my one good that I pulled out was Kyle Pitts. I put him in my cash lineup. Thought I was smart because he was pretty low owned for a tight end. I think he was like 7% owned in cash. Thought I was doing pretty well. And then my one bad, I put literally everything else. I think I had David Montgomery. I had Matthew Stafford as my cash quarterback. I didn't get the defense right. I mean, I missed on a lot of things last week. I think my process was right. My results just not pay off. So my one bad was pretty much everything after Kyle Pitts. So it's one of those kind of weeks you just got to put it behind you and move on to the next week. Let's go ahead and get to our quarterbacks.
Let's talk quarterbacks.
All right, you two both have the same elite guy here. So, Dennis, I'll let you go first to talk about Mr. Patrick Mahomes there.
Patrick Mahomes is always in play, especially as a cash game option because of that floor that he has. His ceiling has been a little shaky this year. He's only thrown for 300 yards twice, which is very unlike Patrick Mahomes. Their defense is kind of helping him out here more so than the offense in past years. But the other top-end quarterbacks have real question marks. Allen, that offense seems broken the last couple weeks. I just can't bring myself to do that even against the Patriots, whereas the Chargers are allowing the second most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So even though I have trouble finding someone to pair him with that I like in GPPs, as a cash game, you can play him. I'm probably going a little lower, but on the top end, I think he's your safest guy and probably has his highest ceiling too. This week.
Anything to add to that, Tim?
No, not really. I mean, the theme of this slate is that it's a short slate, right? We have a bunch of teams on bye. Some of the highest scoring teams are off the slate, right? San Francisco, Minnesota, Miami, Philly, all off the slate this week. Patrick Mahomes, like Dennis said, kind of gives you a ceiling that no other quarterback on the slate really can. I mean, you can maybe make the argument for the guy I know you're about to, but I don't know. I think it's a pay up for Mahomes or probably more in the mid-range kind of week for me. So
yeah, I agree. And the guy that you're talking about, go ahead and hit it.
Lock it in.
So I'm going a little bit different. Obviously, he just mentioned Josh Allen, at 8.2 versus New England. New England's defense versus the pass is not good this year. I think they're 23rd DVOA. Obviously, Allen's got the rushing upside that Mahomes doesn't really give you. He gives you a little bit of rushing upside, but not quite the level that Josh Allen does. In coming into last week, he had 3 straight games with a rushing touchdown. He didn't get one last week in London, so I think he gets back into that. At 8.2, you don't get really a discount off Mahomes, but you do have similar upside as Mahomes, and I think a decent floor. So Josh Allen for me, and unlike Mahomes, there's a clear and obvious stacking option I think that you can get that we'll talk about in a little while. And I had a couple other guys in the elite tier as well, and I'll talk about Mr. L-Jax versus Detroit, 7.6. And the reason I like L-Jax is since Dobbins went down, he has averaged double-digit carries since that game. And if you can get a quarterback that's basically also playing running back, it's going to give you a huge floor. L-Jax, even when he has a bad NFL game, he still has a good fantasy game. So L-Jax at 7.6 gives you a little bit of a discount over the other two guys. And I think this is a good matchup for him as well. So I like L-Jax in the elite tier. We'll move down into the value or to the mid tier here, Tim. And who do you got for your mid tier guy?
Yeah, I'm going to go, man, hold on. Do I take the homer call here? Yeah, you know what? I'll do the homer call. Sure, I'll put on my cheese head right here behind me. And I'm going with Jordan Love, baby. Jordan Love playing against the Denver Broncos at 5,800. As my buddy said, all you need is love this week. I think, obviously in a great matchup, Denver Broncos giving up a ton of points to quarterbacks all year. But I think he gets the added bonus of coming off the bye week, right? They've had a whole, 2 weeks to prepare for this game. Everything that I'm hearing is that, Christian Watson is, basically 100%. We'll talk about Aaron Jones here in a minute. He may be back as well. So I think this could be a big week for Jordan Love. You guys know I don't usually put my homer hat on, but I think he could get it done this week.
Yeah, I like Love as well. Like you mentioned, the Broncos are 32nd DVOA versus the pass. And he's got some good stacking options that are fairly cheap that you can stack them with if you want to. Denver's just that bad. Like you just at this point, just play whoever's playing against Denver. And I think
exactly. Like you said, they're 32nd DVOA across the board and then 32nd against the pass. So it is the best matchup that he could get. So yeah, I love it.
Dennis, you got a guy that we all have on our list as well. If you want to talk about Geno Smith.
Yeah, Geno Smith. The Cardinals are 30th DVOA against the pass. It gives me some trepidation because DK Metcalf is really looking like he's on the wrong side of questionable.
Yeah.
But those quarterbacks cannot cover what Seattle has. They're giving up a ton of points to opposing quarterbacks. Geno is always going to be low owned for some reason.
Yeah,
it's like people just don't believe. They see Geno Smith and they think Geno Smith with the Jets. Yeah. Seattle's not on a lot of primetime games, so people don't get exposure to him. But I think him and stacking him with Lockett, it makes a lot of sense in tournaments this week.
Yeah, I like Geno as well. We talked about it on the show last week, and it's why I went with Stafford last week is the Arizona Cardinal bump that they seem to give.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Stafford didn't take advantage of it as much as I'd want him to, but it's typical that you see Arizona on the slate. The quarterbacks tend to do really well with that.
Yeah, it's also the second highest over under too.
Yeah, second highest over under in the slate.
That's what I was going to add. Yeah, they're projected for 26 points, which is only half a point less than Kansas City. And you guys know I say this every week. Quarterback scoring is most heavily correlated with Vegas implied total. Yeah. So at this point, 6K. I think, in my opinion, he is the cash game quarterback. I know we're going to talk about some other guys here in a minute, but I think Geno provides the highest floor per dollar.
Yeah, good call. You got one more guy there in your mid tier there, Dennis. Talk about him a little bit.
Yeah, your buddy from last week, Stafford. We'll get to the running backs later, but no Kyron Williams this week. Rivers is also out, so they're down to their third string running back and a bunch of plotters that they signed off the street or the practice squad. They're going to have to rely a heck of a lot more on Matthew Stafford in this game. Where last week, I don't think he really played that bad. They just turned it over to the running game.
Kyron, yeah.
And he didn't really get a lot of opportunity. So it wasn't really his fault, more like a great game script type thing. They're going to have to rely on him in the passing game a whole lot more in this game. Pittsburgh has not been great. They've been allowing the 30th most points to opposing receivers and the 20th to opposing quarterbacks. So it's a good matchup. Again, on this horrible slate where we have 6 games with an over-under of 40.5 or below. This is one of the few that doesn't have that. It's about a 45 right now. I've seen 44.5, 45 in that range, which again is pretty close to the Kansas City total, which is the highest on the slate. So I think game script, I don't think they can rely on those running backs. So I think he has a big game today or on Sunday.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a
lot. If I could add one last thing. So you guys know I love paying attention to Vegas totals. I talk about it every week. And this week, basically every game total has gone down since it opened, right? Some have gone down 9 points. Some have gone down 6.5, 5.5, 5, 4. The only game on the slate that has not gone down is Rams and Steelers. It's gone up by 1.5 points since open. Yeah. So Vegas is telling you that this game probably has the best chance to go over the total.
Yeah, KC opened at 53. I bet it at 51. I bet the under at 51, and now they're down to 47.5, and he may go down another half point or so. So
good stuff. Let's move down into the value tier, Tim. Who you got?
Wow, I say I don't have either one of the guys I have. Okay. I'll tell you what, I'll go with Russ Wilson on the other side of the Packer game. So I'm going to take off my Packer fan hat here and tell you that the Packers injury report right now looks terrible. Only maybe the New England Patriots injury report looks worse right now. Devondre Campbell, outside linebacker, doubtful. He's not going to play, right? Jair Alexander, he may not play. Quay Walker, our best linebacker, he may not play. Like half the Packers may not play. And if that's the case, I think it's a Russell Wilson week. I think you saved a few $100s. We've talked about it. It'll be a theme of this show. Value is hard to come by, right? With the uncertainty with the Rams backfield now, I think you got to find ways to find value. And that extra 400 down from Love to Russell Wilson may be worth it this week. You know, Russ obviously at home. And if the Packers really banged up, man, I think he can get it done. And I mean, the thing is like he's had a 30-point game earlier this year against Washington. I don't know that any of the other quarterbacks in the 5K range have had 30-point games.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying he will, but I think he's got the best chance of a 30-point game of anybody in that range.
Yeah. And he hasn't been that bad for fantasy. He's been terrible for NFL-wise, but fantasy-wise, he's been actually pretty decent. Another quarterback that's been pretty decent for fantasy, you also have in your value tier here, Dennis, Mr. Sam Howell, who was just mentioned in the chat by Brian as well. Talk about Howell a little bit.
Yeah, I like Howell in this game. The one caveat here is it is expected to be windy. It's probably the windiest game on the slate. They're looking at about 20 miles an hour with 30-mile-an-hour gusts. 20 miles an hour is kind of the level line of demarcation in the NFL where it starts to affect the passing game. So that's something to keep an eye on. But the guy has a 29.4 ceiling game versus Chicago. New York Giants, 26 DVOA against the pass. They're banged up. I think they get some short fields. The Giants' offensive line lost 2 more linemen. If you're a 300-pound power lifter, go to New York, you'll probably get a tryout.
Yeah.
They're signing guys from off the couch that are coming in, not just making the team, but they're playing. Yeah. So it's terrible. I foresee some turnovers, some sacks, maybe a strip sack or 2. Washington will probably get some short fields, which will help Howell. And like I said, he's got the kind of upside at that small price tag, $5,500, that most quarterbacks in that price range simply don't have.
Yeah, that's a good call. And talking about straight from the couch, was it that game that they had the guy intro himself as straight from the couch? Did y'all see that?
Pugh.
Yeah.
And they lost. They lost another lineman last week and another one in practice this week.
Yeah, and he came on the intro of the game. He was like, you know, they always say like so and so from Alabama. He was like so and so straight from the couch.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. The last guy I had, I put a question mark next to it because I wanted to ask y'all what y'all thought of this guy. And Brian Hoyer at 4.9. This game is going to be ugly. It's going to be the battle of 2 backup quarterbacks, most likely. Do y'all have any interest in a guy like that? I mean, he's got some weapons in that offense. Yeah, you're both shaking your head, and that's kind of what I figured.
I think they're just down the run.
Me too. And I think that Russ and Howell are both excellent options for just a few $100s more.
Agreed.
Like if he was 4K, I think he'd be more of a question. But at 4,900, you just find the extra $400 or $500.
Yeah, I agree 100%. All right, let's get to the tight ends.
Did somebody say tight ends?
All right, not surprisingly, we all have the same 2 guys in the top tier here. There's really a tier of their own. But I'll let you go first, Tim. Pick which one you want, and then you can have the other.
I do. I want to talk about Travis Kelce, and I'll tell you why. Usually, you guys know I always say I love having a Friday show because by Friday, we can start to see where the ownership is starting to go. And I was really surprised that Travis Kelce is as popular this week as he is. And some people are even pushing him as a cash game play, which I think is crazy. But if you think about what we talked about, what players really have ceiling on this slate, you know, one of them might be Travis Kelce, right? He's obviously in a late game, right? He's gotten insane volume the last couple of weeks. There are a couple different ways you can go and cash this week. And I think one of them is paying up for Travis Kelce. I think most people are either going to pay all the way up or all the way down at tight end and cash. I probably won't be going that way. But I mean, Travis Kelce just looks like he's in an absolute smash spot. He's literally the only pass catcher Patrick Mahomes can rely on. And we saw the last couple of weeks, he kind of just looks up and tries to find Kelce, right? Or if he's, you know, getting lost, right? Or he's scrambling, he's just, okay, where's Kelce at? I'll just throw it at him. So I think when you're that kind of player, you know, you have to consider him.
Yeah, I like it. And Dennis, I wanted to ask you a question real quick on Kelce, because you talked about it a little bit in our group chat earlier today. 2 tight end builds. You said you kind of
Yeah.
like it this week. Are you feeling the 2 tight end builds with Kelsey?
Yeah, I mean, I hate the 2 tight end build, and I saw a stat that someone shared with me from week 2 in the Millie Maker. 17% of the lineups in the Millie Maker in that week had 2 tight end build. Of the ones that finished in the top 1%, only 6% had the 2 tight end build. So it usually doesn't work, but I see a lot of tight ends this week for the first time probably all season in different price ranges that are playable. I haven't started building my lineups yet, so I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I wouldn't feel bad about it this week.
Yeah, good call. Go ahead.
Yeah, Travis Kelsey usually has an advantage. I have this chart that I like to use that kind of says a matchup, like a tight end matchup. Travis Kelsey is usually number 1. That's no surprise. But this week he's got like a giant gap over the next closest person. So
yeah,
I just love him this week, man.
Could be Kelsey week. You have the other guy, I guess we can call him elite. He's quite a bit cheaper than Kelsey, but he's the other guy elite there. Dennis, talk about Mark Andrews.
Okay, I'll talk him up. But even though I like both, I'll talk about why you should play Mark Andrews over Kelsey. He's cheaper, obviously. His opponent, the Detroit Lions, do have a good defense, but they're allowing the 28th most points to opposing tight ends, whereas the Chargers have been a lot stingier against tight ends, allowing the 9th most. So it's a better matchup for Andrews. And Kelsey just isn't as dynamic as he used to be, and he's 34 years old. Tight ends usually don't have a lot of wiggle, so he takes a lot of hits. He's taken a lot of hits over the years. He's played a lot of extra games due to the Chiefs' Super Bowl runs. And to give you an idea, another similar tight end who has similar stats, similar style, he blocked, he wasn't like a big wide receiver, was Gronk.
Mm-hmm.
Gronk is also 34. And Gronk's been out of the league for 2 years.
Yeah, that's a good
So, yeah, I just think Andrews isn't the most dynamic guy, but he's got a little bit more burst than Kelsey does at this stage of their separate career. So I'm going to go for Andrews for save the 2,400 and go from there.
Yeah, and as Tim mentioned too, ownership-wise, I was just looking. It looks like Kelsey is the highest ownership, at least according to Roto-Grinders. Number 2 is Mark Andrews, but he's a full 5% less than Kelsey is. So quite a big jump there. I'll move down into the mid-tier, and we all have the same mid-tier guy, so I'll talk about him. Kyle Pitts at 4K versus Tampa Bay. He's going at Tampa Bay. It's finally happening, I think. I hope. The breakout is finally here. He's gotten at least 9 targets or a touchdown in 3 of his last 4 games. He's had a game with 11 targets. He scored his first touchdown on U.S. soil last week. So hopefully the Kyle Pitts thing keeps ascending. I know I bought heavy into him in Dynasty as well. But at 4K with his potential upside, I think that he's definitely worth the mid tier. If you're going to click the mid tier, he's the one you're clicking probably. Let's go ahead and just slide down.
Before you did, I did have one thing on Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you look up defense versus position for tight ends against Tampa Bay, it's going to say that Tampa Bay is pretty good against tight ends. But the thing is, Kyle Pitts is not a tight end. He's a slot receiver. And if you look up slot receivers against Tampa Bay, they give up the 2nd most points to slot receivers. So while if you listen to some people who just go by DVP, they're going to tell you this is not a good spot. This is a great spot for Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, and I forget the percentage, but he's lining up at slot more than he's lining up at tight end. It's over 50% in the slot.
Yeah. And I'll add one other thing to the Pitts. He's actually leading all tight ends in the NFL in percentage of his team's air yards.
Oh, good stat too. Yeah, so Pitts is who it is in the mid tier for sure. All right, let's move down into the value tier. And Tim, I'll give you the option here to be Homer again if you want to. If not, you can go with the other guy.
Yeah, I think if you're stacking Jordan Love, you're probably playing Luke Musgrave. I just think he's just so cheap for the role that he has at 3,300. When I talked earlier about Travis Kelsey, I said usually you're paying all the way up or you're paying all the way down. I think he's one of the pay down options. Like I said, he's got a great role. His snap share has increased every week. He's coming off a bye. Last game he played, he probably wasn't 100%. And then the best thing is that Denver's just so bad against tight ends, right? 32nd DVP against tight ends. So It's the stone best matchup he could possibly get at 3,300. He fits well into builds. I think that's probably where I'm going, even if I don't go Love at quarterback.
Yeah, I like that call. Dennis, you have the other guy that we all had. Talk about Mayer.
Yeah, Mayer is tight ends. He's a rookie, and tight ends usually start a little slower than a lot of other positions because there's a lot to learn there. You got to learn the blocking schemes and the receiving, the route trees. So they tend to develop at a little slower pace than wide receivers or linemen, running backs, what have you. Last week, he had 6 targets versus 5 the rest of the season. So he's being assimilated into the offense. And actually, I think having Brian Hoyer as opposed to Jimmy G actually helps him.
I agree.
Versus the other receivers because Hoyer's captain check down. Even when he's 38 now, but even when he was 28, he was still captain check down.
Yeah,
true.
I guess David Carr's modeled his game after Brian Hoyer after last night. But I think that actually helps Mayer. He's cheap, 2,700. I mean, if you get 6 targets at that versus that abysmal Chicago defense, I'm all about that.
Yeah, I like it.
Allows you to pay up a lot other places too.
Yeah, I really like Michael Mayer too. And the thing that stuck out to me, and I know you said yours look a little bit different, Geoff, was that I thought they would be pretty similar in terms of percent rostered. And they're like night and day. I have Luke Musgrave at 17. I have Michael Mayer at 4.
Wow.
Like, I think at 4%, he's a much, much better play. Like, insanely good play.
Absolutely. And I was just looking up his snap percentage. He jumped. So he was getting
81% last week.
81%. Yep. Absolutely. So he's definitely the full-time tight end now. So the last guy I had those 2 guys as well. And this guy I wanted to talk about because I had some conflicting stats. And this is why you have to dive deeper sometimes into the stats when you look at them. So I looked up DVOA versus tight end in Seattle, and they were 30th DVOA. I was like, okay, good. Let me put Zach Ertz there. And then I went and looked at their points given up to tight ends, and they give up the 3rd fewest points to tight ends. And I was like, well, how can that be if they're so bad DVOA? And I dove into it. In their last 3 games, they played the Panthers, the Giants, and the Bengals. And I bet nobody can name the tight ends on those 3 teams that have done anything in fantasy. So that kind of skews the numbers a little bit. So
hold on. Don't talk about Irv that way. He's just going through a dry spell right now.
A dry spell for his career. Yeah, so I put Ertz on there at 3.2 because I think he's still viable. I think I'm clicking the other 2 guys more likely, but if you wanted an alternative, I think Ertz is still viable. He's still getting a bunch of targets in that offense.
Also, McBride's target share is increasing and his snap rate is increasing, and that hurts Ertz.
Yeah, agreed. And I hope that does happen because I have a lot of McBride in my dynasty league. So it's been holding on my taxi squad waiting for the breakout to happen. All right, let's get to our running backs.
It's time for running backs. Running backs.
And we're going to go ahead and hit the infamous double drop right here.
Lock it in.
Tim, take it away.
So, in my opinion, there are 2 no question lock it in plays on this slate. I was telling Dennis in the pre-show I was deciding between which one of the 2 I was going to take, and he took the other one. But it's Kenneth Walker, man. This guy rates as my number 1 running back this week, and I think he's like 6th in pricing, right? He's cheaper than Eckler. He's cheaper than Saquon Barkley. He's cheaper than Josh Jacobs. He's cheaper than Bijan. And I have him as my number 1 running back this week. So I think you absolutely smash Kenneth Walker. People are like, oh, Tim, he's going to be so highly owned. I don't care. If you look at the last few Millie Maker winners, they've won with chalk running backs.
Yep.
Chalk running backs win tournaments, right? You can get different a lot of other ways this week. So don't fade the guy in the best spot. Nobody has given up more touchdowns to running backs than the Arizona Cardinals. They've given up 8 in 7 games or 6 games. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's not going to, that's not going to stop. We talked about it with Kyron Williams. It's the same thing the Rams did last week. They get it in close. You run it in with your running back against the Cardinals. That's going to happen again this week.
Yeah, I love it. Dennis, who you got in your elite tier?
I got Josh Jacobs. We've talked about the Chicago defense. They're bad against the run. They're bad against the pass. Jacobs is getting elite usage. He's not being very efficient. I think that's part of the fact that he held out. Running backs who hold out usually don't have good beginnings to their season. It's happened. Le'Veon Bell, you can go all the way back. But he's had 52 touches. in his last 2 games. That's like 90s running back usage right there. So eventually, and he's starting to get better. He's still averaging only 2.9 yards a carry, which is somewhat concerning. But he's also heavily involved in the passing game. Again, going back to Hoyer and his checkdowns, he should have a very solid floor with that. And if he gets 25, 26 touches against the Bears, he's going to spring a few. So I'm looking at him coming in, well over 20 fantasy points. Again, with Hoyer, I think they lean on the running game a lot more. There's no reason to have him back there slinging it around. There's absolutely none. And there's the favorite. He should be running out the game when they're running out the clock. So I see him getting a ton of touches against a very inferior opponent.
Yep, I love it.
Yep.
Both.
I could see him having a game very similar to the one that Kamara had last night, right? Where he's not super efficient, but his volume is just off the charts.
Off the charts, agreed. Tim, you got one guy there in the elite tier with the question mark. I wanted you to talk about him a little bit.
Yeah, I think we have to talk about Aaron Jones. I think he's kind of the wild card on this slate because the running backs at the top are all pretty chalky, right? And we know who you're going to play. And I think the guy that's kind of sneaky in there is Aaron Jones. That A.J. Dillon's been bad. I mean, he's been really, really bad. And they are just praying that they can get Aaron Jones back in this game. 31st DVOA against the run. Like, it sets up as such a good spot for Aaron Jones. He's priced down, obviously, since he's been out. It is a hamstring injury, and that does worry me because those do have a high rate of repeating. But, they're not going to put him out there if he's not 100%. They know that he's the future since AJ is kind of dust. So if they say he's ready to go, I expect them to lean on him heavily in the game this weekend.
Yeah, and they didn't play him like we thought he was going to play, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
he didn't play, and then they had the bye week, so he's got a lot of rest there. So if he was close to making it 2 weeks ago, I think he should be good to go for this week for sure.
Yeah, I was going to mention it's the Austin Eckler treatment. It's the same thing. Eckler could have come back 2 weeks ago. They gave him the bye week plus the extra week. I think they did the same thing with Aaron Jones.
Yeah,
gave him the extra week to make sure he's good to go.
Good call. All right, moving down into the mid tier, and I see Mickey mentioned the guy I'm about to talk about, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs at Baltimore, 6.3. The coach came out and said he's going to get a huge workload. And typically when coaches come out and say stuff like positive like that, it tends to be pretty true. Obviously, no David Montgomery. I don't think he's officially ruled out. He's doubtful. He's not playing. We know he's not playing. And then maybe even Craig Reynolds, who might steal a few touches. He's questionable. He may not play.
David Montgomery has been ruled out, by the way. Officially
ruled out. Okay. And Craig Reynolds, I think, is still questionable, right? I think he might play, but I know he was listed as
questionable.
The Baltimore Ravens 22 versus the DVOA versus the running back, and just really the workload in general. He's also a pass catcher coming out of the backfield. We've seen his speed as well. I think this could be a breakout game for Gibbs, given the workload that he's going to get this week. So I like him a lot at 6.3.
Yeah, I didn't even mention on my Walker segment that Zach Charbonnet probably won't play. He was DNP all week. So this could be one of those David Montgomery situations from a couple of weeks ago where he sees 30 touches.
30 touches, yeah, good call. Dennis, who you got in your mid-tier?
I got one of my favorite plays on the slate is Isaiah Pacheco. Like I said, Mahomes is Mahomes, but he hasn't been really slinging it this year. Like I said, he only had 2 games of 300 yards or more. Pacheco for 6,100 is getting about 20 touches a game. Vegas has Kansas City winning the game, so if that happens, he should be running it out. He doesn't really have any competition for rushes. He's not the third down back. McKinnon still is, but he's getting somewhere between 3 and 6 targets a game, which elevates his floor. And finally, San Diego is giving up the 7th most running back points. And like I said, Pollard didn't have a great game yesterday or last week until that one big 60-yard catch. But I've had my issues with Pollard as a Cowboys fan.
Yeah.
But I think Pacheco really has a big game, and they lean on him pretty heavily in this one.
Yeah, and surprisingly, you mentioned his passing work, his receiving work. It was kind of a surprise. Coming into the season, I was a big proponent of McKinnon stealing all the receiving work, but Pacheco's getting work. I mean, he already has more catches this year than he did last year.
Yeah.
So I like that a lot. It's a good call. Tim, what do you got for your mid-tier?
Let's see. I'll take the guy that nobody had, Jerome Ford. This is a guy that I told you is probably one of my, sneaky pay down options this week. Let me look up his percentage real quick, but it is clear that Cleveland is committing to the run. I don't care if Watson plays or whoever plays quarterback this week. They are committed to the run. This is old school Browns football where they have the best defense or arguably the best defense in the league, and they're playing Gardner Minshew and the Colts. Right. I seriously think that between him and Kareem Hunt, they could run the ball 40 times this week. So, yeah, I think at 5,100, even with a shared role, I think he's just too cheap. I have projected for about 3 times value. And the thing I said about last week is that even when that game was in hand, he was still the guy that was out there closing it out in the last 2 minutes. So, yes, Kareem Hunt will cut into his touches, but that's why he's 5,100.
Yeah, I like it. The last guy we have in the mid-tier, me and Tim both have. Oh, I'm sorry, we got another guy after this guy. I got Brian Robinson. I call him the other B-Rob because every site has, B Robinson listed, and you don't know if it's Bijan or Brian sometimes. Going at New York Giants at 5.8. The Giants are terrible versus the run, 30th versus the run. They give up the 4th most points to running backs. The Commanders want to run the ball. He's been their go-to guy. I know everybody wanted it to be Antonio Gibson. It's definitely not Antonio Gibson. So Brian Robinson, who's also getting some surprising passing work as well. I think he caught a touchdown pass last week, something that we didn't see from him much last year. So I like Brian Robinson a lot this week. And Dennis, you got to convince me on this one because I was really high on this guy in season long. I had him as my RB5 coming into my rankings, and he's been killing me. So please tell me you see the light at the end of the tunnel for Mr. Ramondre Stevenson.
This is more of a game script type call than a purely statistical one. If New England has any hope to keep this thing close, they got to run the ball, and keep it away from the Bills. That's their really only chance to win the game. They have zero confidence in Mac Jones, and he's given them no reason to have confidence in him. And I remember a game a couple of years ago. Now, it was a lot windier than this game. This game is supposed to be another windy game, but they basically played in about 30, 35 mile an hour winds in Buffalo. And Mac Jones threw the ball 3 times.
3 times. I remember that game.
Yeah. And completed 2 of them. But again, he's going to throw the ball a lot more than 3 times in this game. There's nowhere near the win that it was last time. But I think Belichick knows that the only way that they have any hope is to pound the run. So that's why I threw him in there.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good pivot off of some of the other guys we mentioned, and he's pretty cheap. And if he can just capture,
nobody's going to own him.
Yeah, he'll be low owned for sure. All right,
I was kind of surprised how low Brian Robinson is. I thought he was a good kind of mid-range option to pivot off of Pacheco. Figured he'd come around 10%. I have him closer to 5%.
Yeah.
And at 5%, I think, he's a game script running back, like you said. Like, that's what Washington does. When they get ahead, they just pound Brian Robinson. So I don't care if it's Tyrod or Daniel Jones. I don't see how this doesn't set up as a good game script for Brian Robinson.
Yeah.
I like that call too.
All right, we'll move down into the value tier, and I will honestly say there is not a ton of value. I had to really reach to find somebody that I liked. So I'm going with Jaylen Warren at the Rams at 5,000 flat. He's had at least 6 targets in 4 out of the 6 games this year. He's had 3 straight games with at least 8 carries. Do the math. That's 14 opportunities. The Rams are 20th DVOA versus running backs. I don't love the call, but again, if you're looking for value, if you're looking for ways to get up to some of these guys we mentioned already, there's another guy that was chalk until about, 5 hours ago, and he's no longer chalk. But Jaylen Warren at 5K is probably the cheapest running back that I'm probably going to roster in any of my lineups. Dennis,
I want to talk about Zach Evans real quick, and that's the guy that you were alluding to. You guys know, I've said it again, I love having a Friday show because if this was a Thursday show, we would be telling you to play Zach Evans. I think after the press conference that Sean McVay had today, nobody's going to be playing Zach Evans anymore, unless you're like one of those, I'm going to make a lineup on Thursday kind of people. It is very clear they do not trust him, right? Like Sean McVay went out of his way to say we could have 3, even 4 running backs active for this game. You don't do that if you're confident in your running back's abilities. So, look, I don't trust Sean McVay. I've said that a million times. What I do trust is the inactive report. If it comes Sunday morning and 2 of those guys end up being inactive, then I think you consider Zach Evans. Outside of that, I don't think he's playable.
Yeah. And they mentioned that the Darrell Williams is going to be active for that game. Henderson.
Henderson. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's going to be the third down back. They already put that out there.
Yep.
So Evans is going to have no role in the passing game. The guy only caught 30 passes in his whole college career for 3 years. He's a small guy. He's 202 pounds. So he can't pass block. He's probably not going to get any goal line work at that size. So what is he going to do? Run between the 20s? I mean,
he will. He'll give you 12 for 50 yards, and he'll give you a 5 spot on DraftKings. Like you can't do it, man. Yeah, right. Like there are too many. We'll talk about it in a minute, but I think if you're paying down this week, it's either at tight end or at wide receiver. I think if you pay down at running back this week, you're asking to take like a 5 in your lineup.
Yeah. Now you do have a pay down running back.
I did. I put Deonta Foreman, and the only reason I put him is because I love playing a running back the week after he was chalky when nobody wants to play him, especially after a disappointment. Roshan has already been rolled out with the concussion. He's not going to play, which means it's going to be another week that Foreman gets probably 20 touches at 4,800. And we've talked about this game multiple times. It's 2 backup quarterbacks. It's going to be a great game skip for running. You know, he may not get the volume that Josh Jacobs does, but he's 4,800. Yeah. So I prefer Foreman much more this week than I do last week. I don't love him, but I think if I'm paying down, I think it's probably Foreman.
All right. And Dennis, you got one guy that's even cheaper than Foreman. Talk about him a little bit.
Yeah, this is bear with me. Don't kill me on this one. Latavius Murray at 4,400. And there's a couple reasons why I like him. One, he was splitting 80% of the goal line work with Damian Harris.
Yep.
Harris is out after that scary hit that he took. So he should get the vast majority of the goal line work that the Bills are figured or predicted to win the game. Last week, when Harris was out, he only had 2 fewer carries than Moss.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He had 12 carries. He's not very productive in the passing game, obviously, but he should be on the field if the Bills are winning in the fourth quarter, because I doubt they're going to want to wear out their starter, or Cook, not Moss.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, James Cook. Like I say, he only had 2 carries fewer. He gets all the goal line work. Josh Allen isn't running quite as much. This year, he's got the shoulder injury, too.
Yep.
So I don't see him taking sneaks. I don't see him wanting to take a lot of hard hits at the goal line. I think he could easily sneak in for a touchdown. Now, he's not a guy that you should start your build with or anything like that. But you have the lineup that you really love, and you have 4,400 left at the running back position. I like him a heck of a lot more than Evans or anybody else in that price range.
Yeah, that's a great call. And I actually had looked this up. He leads all Buffalo Bills in red zone touches.
Yeah.
So like even before he was that guy, he has 12. Mm-hmm. The next closest is 9. So I actually love that call. I think that's a great pivot.
Good stuff. All right, let's get to the receivers.
And now, wide receivers.
And we're getting double drops this week. We don't usually do that, but we got a second one here.
Lock it in.
All right, Dennis, you have the other lock of the week that Tim was considering as well, and I agree. I think he's probably a guy you start your lamps with to start off here. You talk about Cooper Kupp a little bit.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp. He is the only stud receiver that really is unquestioned this week. Doesn't have any question marks about him for the matchup, with the quarterback, with any of that. I like him a lot more than other similar price up quarterbacks or wide receivers. Adams has questions with Hoyer. Diggs, I know you like him, Geoff, but the one thing the Patriots are really good at is taking away opponents' number one option. Adams had 2 catches last week.
So I got a stat for that when we get some with Diggs.
Yeah. Kupp comes back. First 2 weeks back, has 21 targets. The running backs, like I said with Stafford, they're not going to be able to cut it. They have to rely on the passing game. So who's the alpha male in that room? It's going to be Kupp. The the Steelers do not have the cornerbacks to cover him. And he's got the highest upside on the slate, bar none.
Yeah.
And you got to have him in GPP. I like him in cash too. And I think there is enough value to get him in there in cash. He's got a solid floor. He's got the highest ceiling on the slate. I think it's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Play Cooper Kupp this week.
With you 100% on that one. I'll let you talk about go ahead and talk about Diggs, and I'll add my stat on the end of there, Tim.
No, go ahead. I just the thing I like about Diggs is that, like you said, everybody's gonna be playing Cooper Kupp. Like he is, like I said, Walker and Kupp is where I start my cash lineup and probably a lot of my GPPs. But Diggs, he is Allen's go-to. He is Allen's Kelsey, right? He's gonna get you 10 plus targets every week, and he's getting a ton of red zone looks as well. So let me pull this up. I had it here a second ago. Buffalo. So like I said, he's got 9, right? He's got more than twice the next nearest receiver. So I mean, I don't know that he has the upside that Cooper Kupp does. Maybe you'll tell me with your stat. But I think he's got more upside than some people think.
Yeah. And my stat is, it's pertaining to what he said about taking your best player away. Diggs, I think over the last, I think it's 5 or 6 games. I don't have the stat written down. I thought I did. But he's averaging like 21 points against New England Patriots over the last 5 or 6 games. So he's always been their best player, and they still couldn't take him away. So I do like Diggs in that sense. And the last guy I have in there, and honestly, I only put him here so I can hit my new drop. It's the squeaky wheel gets greased. We now have a drop for it. Adams, of course, came out and expressed his displeasure with not getting enough targets. In his matchup against his former team, did not get the work that he thought he should. Now he's got a backup quarterback that he can kind of push around. He's going to get 1 billion targets, I think, this week. They're going to be very inefficient targets, but quite frankly, if he can catch 5 or 6 of them, I think he can make something happen. At 8.2, you're getting a discount off of Kupp. You're getting a discount off of Diggs. So I do like him this week. Devontae Adams and the squeaky wheel gets greased, which is one of the few narratives that we use on the show that actually tends to work out usually. Especially with
I just want to say, anybody who longtime fans of the show, today is a momentous occasion. Okay, I do not remember the last time Keenan Allen was on a main slate and Geoff did not have him on his list. Mr. Copy Paste himself.
Yes, did not have
Can't
Allen.
believe it.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. So I've always said, and this could be the exception this year because of how well he's played, but I've always said if he gets above 8,000, then I won't play him because he always hangs in that 7K, 7.6, 7.5. He's 8.6 this week, and Dennis, I'll let you take it away. I love Allen. Everybody knows I call him copy paste because I literally copy paste him every week into the sheet. I play him every week. I don't have him this week though because 8.6 is kind of expensive, but he's been a beast. So talk about him a little bit. Dennis.
Yeah. If Kansas or if San Diego is going to stay close, he's their guy, like you said.
It's Keenan Allen.
That's really the only hope. The one thing I have that I double thinking it a little bit now is with Mike Williams out, they don't have that guy to lift the top off the defense. So there's not going to be a lot of yards after catch for Allen, but he will be targeted a whole lot. I mean, I don't like Eckler this week. I do like Palmer at very much of a discount, but he's not going to get nearly the volume that Allen is.
Yeah,
and that's just a volume play.
The thing with Allen this year is he's been getting the touchdowns, and that's why his price has finally gone above that 8,000 price point. Is he's getting the touchdowns?
Yeah, that's just a volume play. Because I don't think they'll be able to run on Kansas City. Eckler, since he came back, just doesn't look right. He didn't look right against Dallas last week, and I think you could see Allen getting 12 to 15 targets.
Yeah,
for sure.
So
let's move down into the mid-tier. Tim, what you got?
Let's see. I'm going to take the guy. You have him too. Okay. I have played this guy almost every week. Last week, I think he was one of the guys you talked about that kind of let us down a little bit in the afternoon, and that's Marquise Hollywood Brown. I think I'm going right back to him this week. I think he's, again, a great cash game play. Now, one of the stats I had in the thread this week is he is 5th in the NFL in terms of air yards at 5,300. I talked about I like Josh Dobbs. I like him in this matchup against Seattle. Seattle gives up a ton of points to wide receivers. Let me grab that exactly. They are 32nd. So, yeah, play your wide receivers. It's just a great matchup. He's getting all of the volume, and he's coming off a down week. So I think he might not – he's still basically the highest owned or second highest owned wide receiver on the slate. But I don't know how you don't play Hollywood Brown. Especially, I love the secondary stack if you're going to do it, of Walker and Brown. I'm going to have that in a lot of my lineups.
Yeah, in Brown's week, I was telling Dennis pre-show, he actually caught, he was out of bounds, but he caught a touchdown last week early in the game. I thought this is going to be a sign of things to come, and then didn't do much the rest of the game. I think he had a foot out of bounds or something, but he almost caught that touchdown that would have changed his week. So he's been pretty good every single week, week in and week out. So I like that call a lot. Dennis, who you got for your mid-tier?
I'm going to talk about a guy I don't think either of you all have. No, you don't. Tyler Lockett, 6K. We talked about the Arizona defense when we talked about Geno Smith. There's 31st DVOA against the pass, giving up the sixth most points to opposing tight ends. And this is really big if Metcalf doesn't play. Usually Pete Carroll is always on the optimistic side of player being able to play when coming back from injury. Even he's kind of pessimistic this time.
Yes.
No practice Wednesday, no practice Thursday, and a limited session. He's been playing through rib injury, but now he's got a hip injury. So even if he manages to get it out there, I don't know how he's going to be able to manage to make it through the whole game. So Lockett, again, they don't have anybody to cover him. So I think he eats in this game.
Yeah,
I do like the Walker call as far as closing it out, but getting the lead is going to be a lot on Lockett and Geno.
Yeah, and I will say that if Metcalf does play, I expect it to be the old Julio Jones decoy. Yeah, because you're right. I love what you said about Pete Carroll because it's so true. He is always optimistic that the guys are going to be good to go. And this week he's like, I don't know about DK, man. He's really sore this week. I don't know. And that tells me that, like you said, he's on the wrong side of questionable. So,
and Smith-Nigba has not been able to live up to the rookie hype. So it's all going to be on Lockett in the passing game, I think.
Great.
Yep, I like that.
All right, so I'm going to talk about a guy that surprisingly wasn't on Mr. Homer's playlist or his sheet over here, and I'm going to go with Mr. Christian Watson at Denver, 5.6. We've talked about Denver pretty much every week this year, how bad their defense is. To take it even a step further, no team has given up more deep ball touchdowns than the Broncos, and of course Watson is the deep ball guy. Sorry, only Washington's given up more. Broncos given up 5. Washington's given up 6. So Watson, he's only played I think 2 games, but I think he's sort of getting more and more acclimated. At 5.6, he's their big play guy. I think if you're going to play Love, I think Watson's a good choice as well to plug in there with him to stack them. We got a bunch of mid-tier guys. Let's go back through, Tim. Give me another one of your guys.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in the mid-tier this week at wide receiver, so that's pretty much where I'm going to live. Okay, I'll go with Drake London. I don't think either one of y'all have that guy, and this is a guy I played last week. If you guys were on the puke stack, as I called it last week, Ritter to Drake London, that stack took down the Millie Maker, and we had it on this show as my puke stack of the week. I don't like it quite as much this week, but as we talked about, you beat Tampa Bay via the pass, right? Not with the run. So while I think Kyle Pitts is probably the biggest beneficiary, Drake London at 5,100 is still too cheap. He is far and away their best receiver. He's getting the most volume week in and week out, and he's priced like a wide receiver too. So I'm not saying I think he's a cash play because he's still attached to Desmond Ritter, but I think that he's definitely another high upside GPP play, just like he was last week.
Yeah, good call. Dennis, give us one more of your guys.
Josh Palmer, who I mentioned earlier. Yeah. Would anybody be surprised if I told you, even with Mike Williams a couple weeks ago, over the past 3 weeks, he's had 22 targets? That's what Palmer has. So he's had double-digit fantasy points the last 3 weeks. He hasn't really turned it on yet. His top is 15.2, I believe. But he's getting the targets. He's 4.8. He doesn't really have to do a whole heck of a lot at 4.8 to get you there. If he can get you 20 fantasy points, 8-9 targets should be more than enough to get you there. Again, who else are they going to throw it to? You got Allen on the top end. You got Eckler as a dump off. Everett, and I forget the other guy that been alternating.
Donald Parham, yeah.
Yeah, they've been pretty much alternating at tight end, so you really can't play either one of those. So they should be playing from behind. They should be playing catch-ups. He should have plenty of opportunity to get targets at 4,800 in the highest OU game of the week. Number 2 receiver. I don't think you can go wrong there.
Yeah.
Yep. I think his volume, like you said, per dollar is much better than Keenan Allen this week. Like he's half the price, and I have them projected for. I have Allen projected for more targets, but like it's not the half difference that their price is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I want to real quick. I want to talk about Zay Flowers since nobody has talked about him yet. I love him this week. He was one of my first guys that I put in my first look lineup because he's averaging 10 targets against zone coverage, and Detroit plays a lot of zone coverage. So we talked about how much we like Mark Andrews this week. I would say I also really like Zay Flowers. He still hasn't had that big breakout game, but his volume's been consistent. And then last week he finally got a touchdown. So you don't run the ball against the Lions, right? You throw the ball. They play a lot of zone, and I think that really fits his skill set.
Good stuff. All right, we'll move down into the value tier. Tim, you did have McLaurin. I want to just throw him out there. We had McLaurin at 5.4 as a play as well. But for time's sake, we'll move down into the value tier. And Dennis, why don't you take one of these values?
Okay, I'm the only one that put him on there, unsurprisingly. Jalen Hyatt, New York Giants. Most people had never heard of Jalen Hyatt. I really hadn't until about 2 weeks ago. But he was originally signed to be more of a deep threat with Slayton back. They're using him more underneath. 3K, he was in on 57 of 77 plays last week. So you're getting a guy at the absolute minimum who was in at almost 3/4 of the Giants' offensive plays. They've been using him underneath. He caught 3 passes for 21 yards last week, 5.1 points. That's not going to get you there. But an underneath target, either Tyrod or Jones, whoever, is not going to have time to throw. So they're going to have to be throwing it underneath. Wandale's the obvious one there. But for 3K, for a guy getting in on 75% of a team's plays, I'm kind of all about that.
Yeah, it only takes one play, really, and especially as fast as he is. If he can break one of those underneath routes and take it to the house, that's all you need. He's already paid off his value right there. I like it.
Yep. I had a lineup earlier that I made that I really liked, and it had 3K left. And I was like, oh, Hyatt fits really nicely here. Click.
There you go.
All right. So the reason I did not have Christian Watson on my list is because I have Romeo Doubs. And I think that even though Patrick Surtain has gotten burned a few times this year, I think he's going to lock up Watson pretty good this week. I expect him to be on him about 80% of the time. So that means that Romeo gets a much better matchup against their number 2 corner, and I think that he smashes. He's basically playing every snap, right? He's gotten consistent target volume week to week. And what we talked about earlier is I think Josh Palmer is going to be one of the chalkier plays on the slate. He's $100 more. So I like him as a pivot. I think most people will go Watson. And so you get him at a lower ownership than I think you should.
Good stuff. Go ahead and talk about Rice, too, while we're at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is like, who do you stack Patrick Mahomes with, right? But it feels like Rice is the only guy that's been like somewhat consistent. I don't know. I mean, the only thing that bothers me about this is that his snap counts have gone down, which is kind of disappointing. He was at 51, 46, then it went down to 30 and went up to 49. But the thing I love about him is he's getting the red zone looks. Right? And I think that's important, right? He didn't get any last week, but he still leads the team with 7. So, well, I mean, other than Travis Kelce, obviously. So, I mean, I think at that 47, 4,800, 4,900 range, you're going to have to play somebody. Why not play a guy in the highest total of the game?
Yeah.
Right? Or highest total on the slate, I mean.
Yep.
He also has 28 targets on the year. That's more than any other wide receiver on the team.
Yeah.
Like he's not the guy, but he's like the number 2, right? Like after Kelce, he's the next guy.
Yep. All right, so I'll talk about there's 2 guys left. You already mentioned Wando Robinson. He's 3.8. He's going to be, I think, fairly chalky as well. He's been, the guy to get most of the targets. He's not done much with them, but he's getting more and more healthy at 3.8. But the guy I want to talk about is Curtis Samuel at the New York Giants at 4K. You know, coming into the season, I really wanted Jahan Dotson to be a thing, and he just has not been a thing. Curtis Samuel actually is the receiver 2 on this team. We thought he was the receiver 3. He's actually the number 2. He's been getting usage, even getting carries as well. They're scheming up plays for him where he used to be just a gadget guy. He's actually the receiver 2 at 4,000 in a good matchup. I like Samuel a lot there at the 4K range. Anybody else you want to talk about before we get to the defense, guys?
No.
All right.
Now I'll back up your Curtis Samuel. He's got 19 targets in the last 3 games, and his point totals 18.2, 18.5, and 14.2.
Yeah,
I mean,
good.
That's
At
for 4K.
Yeah.
100%. All right, let's get to the defenses.
Defense, 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 defense.
All right, Tim, take it away.
All right, so everybody and their mother is going to be playing Kansas City Chiefs at 2,400. And I think they are a solid defense this week. Justin Herbert hasn't been quite as good as we would have hoped. But I'm going to pay $100 more and go back to an old narrative we love on this show, and that's road Goff, right? Jared Goff on the road in Baltimore. It's going to be a windy game. And this year, Goff's been better on the road because he's been able to lean on his running game. Well, guess what? You got no David Montgomery this week. So he's going to be running out there with Jahmyr Gibbs and maybe Craig Reynolds. They're going to struggle. I think they're going to get behind in this game to Baltimore, and then he's going to have to drop back and throw it 30 times. So I think this sets up as an excellent spot for the Baltimore defense. They could realistically give you a 15 score on this slate, and I don't think Kansas City has that kind of upside. So find the extra $100 and play the Ravens this week.
I like it. Dennis, who you got?
I've got Kansas City as well, but I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions. They're actually number 3 overall in the NFL this year in defensive DVOA, and for 3,300. They're nowhere near the top. Lamar Jackson has been careless with the ball. I mean, if you looked at the game against the Steelers, he committed 3 interceptions and a fumble. When he runs, he's kind of loose with the ball. He's been subject to strip sacks, and the game has a very low over-under. So I'll trust the number 3 DVOA in the league at 3,300 in a low over-under game.
2,700.
27. I was thinking of
the Browns. Yeah, I like the Browns in GPPs. That's probably my pick. Rarely do you see a top defense down at 3,300. So I think if you can find the money, I think the Browns, and 2 of the 3 of us had the Browns this week. I think they are like Gardner Minshew. We shot last week. He had 3 picks, right?
And a fumble.
He's very careless. Yeah. And like against the worst defense, right? And the Browns, we saw what they just did to San Francisco. I think they're going to tear up Minshew. I think it's go ahead.
I started to put Browns on my sheet and I started to cry, so I couldn't do it. I had to take it after last week.
It is like they're the real thing, man. Like they're basically number 1 in every defensive category. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that you can pay up for them in cash, but in tournaments, man, especially if you're going to stack them with Jerome Ford, love it.
Yeah, good stuff. Only other defense I had was Seattle versus Arizona for obvious reasons. Arizona's been, Dobbs has played above his pay grade, but I think he's starting to come back down to earth a little bit, and I think Seattle's a good pivot off of the Browns if you wanted to do that. Typically, I don't pay up for defense. I'm all over the Lions and Kansas City this week as well. All right, let's do our stacks.
Goingfor2.com's weekly stack report.
So a peek behind the curtain, we all do our sheets at different times during the week, and I was the last one this week, and I got left with almost nothing because these guys took the stacks that I wanted.
Really?
But yeah, I'll let you go first, Dennis. Talk about your stack because that was one I was looking at as well.
Yeah, Love with Watson and Sutton. We've talked about all of these players except Sutton, so I'll talk about him. He's the most reliable receiver that Denver has. Judy was actually benched last week.
Bad this year.
Yeah, and they've been trade talks and all of that. So if Denver's going to keep pace with Green Bay, I think it'll be Sutton that'll be on the receiving end. We've already talked, like I said, about Love, and Watson. I also wouldn't mind having Dobbs instead of Watson in there for what Tim mentioned. But I think that's a real good stack. It's not an expensive stack. I think a lot of people are going to look at Mahomes and Kelsey and Adams or Allen. And that stack leaves you with less than 4,200 per player through the rest of your lineup. So the opportunity cost there of adding anybody is terrible. So I think you can still add Kupp, you can still add Walker, you can still add some studs to that lineup, and I think that stack will get you about, get you a lot of points.
I like it.
And if Jair Alexander doesn't play, I like that even better.
Yeah. Good stuff. And Tim, you said really when you mentioned your stack, because I guess you didn't think no one would have that stack. And the reason why I like the stack that you have is because it has, a good bring back quality to it. Whereas I couldn't find any other games that had any kind of bring back quality. So go ahead and give us your stack.
Yeah, this is probably going to be my cash game stack. I don't usually stack in cash, particularly with a bring back. But if it works out, it's going to be, Josh Dobbs, Hollywood Brown, and then, of course, my lock of the week, Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, it's a good call. And my stack, and I don't think I've ever done this, is I don't have any bring back on my stack. I went Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs and no bring back because there's nothing.
Okay, I just realized none of us talked about Kendrick Bourne, so I will mention Kendrick Bourne. If I was going to do a bring back, it would be him. He's playing the most snaps on the team, and he's 4,400.
Yeah,
so I think he's the only viable one.
11 targets last week too, which is definitely good. So yeah, if you're going to bring somebody back, he's pretty much the only one I think I would bring back. But I like the Josh Allen and Diggs. I think they have a huge game this week, so that's my stack. Just those two guys, and then if you want to put in Bourne as well. All right, let's get to our sick call.
And now the sick call of the week.
All right, we haven't given the story behind this in a while, so I wanted to just one more time. We got some new viewers and to explain the sick call and how it came about. So Gerson, I don't know if he was in the chat earlier, I don't know if he still is, but Gerson obviously used to be on this show for the last 6 years. This is the first year that he wasn't on the show. And it was about 4 or 5 years ago. We were making our calls at the end of the show, and Gerson was sick literally the whole show. Like he was hacking up a lung. He was literally drinking NyQuil on the show. Like he was pretty bad off. And at the end of the show, he made a call for defense for the New Orleans Saints, who at the time were historically bad defense. They had been absolutely terrible for the last couple of years. It was always play your guys against the Saints. And me and Tim kind of laughed it off like, oh, you must just be sick because this call is not that good. And then, of course, the Saints go out and they're the number one defense on the slate, pretty much break the slate with the game that they had. So ever since then, we've had this segment, the sick call, which is just a call that's sort of thrown out there. We don't expect it to hit very often. Every once in a while, we hit one. We had 2 good ones this year, Puka Nacua in week 1, Tank Dell in week 2. Both were really good hits. But for the most part, these guys are just dart throws. So we'll go ahead and kick it off here with the first dart throw we got. Dennis, give us your sick call of the week.
I have a Wan'Dale Robinson, Curtis Samuel correlation stack smashing for over 25 DK points.
That's
there
nice.
You go. There's your value right there.
Right there, 100%. Yeah, and get the correlation in there as well. 2 cheap receivers that basically play very similar in this sense. So I like that.
I'm going to go even sicker than that because I'm going to go Curtis Samuel, and I'm going to have Darius Slaytron on the other side. The Commanders are bad against the slot, but they're even worse against outside receivers. He had 6 targets last week compared to Wan'Dale's 8. But I think he's got the better chance of giving you a 20 as compared to Wan'Dale. And he's going to be, he also could give you a 4, right? Like realistically, but I think he's got a higher chance of giving you a 20. So if you're going to be doing some stacks, I really like Slaytron.
All right. And I will go with a guy that I've watched a couple of TikTok videos on. And I think Brian Baldinger did one. It was a breakdown of Jameson Williams from last week where he ran a route where it was basically like a fly route, and he had the DB, locked in right next to him. And then Williams stopped on a dime, and the DB was literally 10 yards past him before he was able to even stop. And then, of course, he ended up catching that touchdown later on in the game as well. So I think they're trying to incorporate Williams a lot more in this offense. Obviously, he was a very highly rated drafted rookie, drafted high, even though he came off of an injury off of the championship game. They want to get this guy involved. I think he's explosive at 3.8. I think he can have 1 or 2 big plays and pay off his salary this week. And everyone knows on this show that you've been watching for a while. I like those receivers that can pay off their salary in one hit. A couple of years ago, I had the Jalen Guyton, who caught one pass for 80 yards and a touchdown, and that was it. He paid off for my sick call. This is my Jalen Guyton this year is Mr. Jameson Williams at 3.8. All right, fellas, that wraps the show up. Let's go around the horn here, and I know Dennis, you're not on Twitter anymore, but if you want to talk about, I know you're in the DraftKings group, so kind of just mention that and anything else you wanted to plug.
No, I'm not on Twitter anymore, so I really don't. Well, I am. I mean, I follow a lot of beat writers and whatnot because you kind of have to, and but I'm not real active on there, so I don't have anything to plug.
Fair enough. I know you're also in the DraftKings group. You can find him in there, guys, in my Facebook group. You can tag him. He's in there. I know Dennis is always willing to offer his 2 cents on anything. So appreciate you coming on, Dennis.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, loved having you on. I know we tried to get you on a couple weeks ago, and then I had to push the show to 11:30.
Yeah,
to get you on.
I had to be in at work at like 0:30 the next morning. So.
Yeah, appreciate it. Tim.
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Keto DFS, and then jump in the DFS Roundtable group on Facebook, where I do my weekly thread, gather the best information from all around the internet and put it in one place so that you don't have to look for it. So jump in the group.
Good stuff. As always, guys, you can find me on Twitter at Jeff Lambert77. For those that are in the DraftKings group, I'll be putting up the ownership that I put up every week shortly after the show. It should be posted. Last week, I tried to rush it, and I did it before the show, and it ended up being messed up because I didn't put one of my filters on. So I'm going to do that after the show. So you can find that at DraftKings group on Facebook. Also, the Discord that I run as well. You can find that in my Twitter profile. It's a free Discord. We do season-long Dynasty. We do IDP leagues. We got DFS. We got a little bit of everything in there. So jump in the Discord if you're on Discord as well. All right. For Dennis, for Tim, I'm Jeff. And good luck this weekend, and we'll see y'all next week.
Go, Pack, go!